Okay, sweet. Yeah, so first, thanks for everyone for joining. And then, yeah, I have about hour and a half, 2 hours, as long as y'all need. And I'm here, can answer any questions y'all have. So I don't know if anyone was here last week. It's open book. Can be anything you've been checking. I know you guys get, I think bot access opens today already, like a few hours ago. So if it's something you're charting or mapped out and you just want to get my ideas on it, I'm happy to do that. If you want to do a recap of the day, I'm also happy to do that. So yeah, it'll just be any kind of questions y'all have. All right, so Mule, Bobby, who is this? Oh, Bobby. Wait 1 second here. Okay. So Bobby said SPX. I'll have to read all the questions out loud because the Zoom chat is not going to be recorded. So I need to make sure it's something that when I post on YouTube, it'll be fine. So SPX is sitting around $30 lower since we identified the upside resistance. You see how important it is to not chase the high value nodes. Most people would have gotten calls because of that early upper king node on SPX. What does he mean by this? What happens when a king node flips from over to under spot price? And what do you read to see if this is actionable or not aside from price action? Yeah, so Mule, the critical thing here, which you need to remember, is that these are levels. So the most important thing, right, is like these are levels of high exposure, but just because we have levels of high exposure does not mean price must gravitate towards them. So probably what he means, if you look very early in the day, I pulled up here 9:31. We had a situation. Oh shoot, wait, let me mute again. All right, we had a situation where the king nodes were higher, right? Like if you look at SPY and QQQ, like we have nodes a lot higher, right? We have 645, 648. Actually, I can just circle these. All right, so we have these two up here on SPY. We have this one on QQQ. So like if you immediately are in the logic of okay, we must go to the strong nodes, you're gonna say, okay, I think we can go upwards, right? Now the danger in that is defaulting to that stance is that this volume is constantly changing throughout the day, right? So the much safer way to think of this is not as targets. Well, they are, they sometimes can be levels that attract price, but you have to recognize that they are moving targets, right? The volume that we're looking at on these shifts constantly. It's possible that something you're looking at 5 minutes ago that was a king node it turns into a node that's not very significant at all, right? Or that there's another node that grows in the opposite direction much stronger, or there's a node that grows closer to price and it limits that upside, right? So I think the main point he's making there is make sure you're not chasing any kind of nodes, but also you're watching how these nodes shift, right? So let me see if I don't actually know what time of day he's referencing, but if you'll notice here, right, if you look really early in the day, we have this king nose upside. You flip 5 minutes later, we already see that, okay, this 640, 670, like a lot of this volume has rolled lower on SPY especially, and also SPX, right? SPX is seeing volume flip lower. Um, and so this is a pretty like clear example, right, of like these maps change constantly. So for us to assume that price must go towards one of the nodes is very, very risky. And that's why we always say mark out the strong levels. And once price hits those levels, we can expect a reversal, right? But we never say, okay, we just took calls because we just saw some big node to the upside, right? Always we wait for these levels to hit, expect a reaction. Of course, make sure you have a chart thesis and like good confluence across the three indexes. But that's sort of how it's best to tackle or to use this tool, right? Okay, so Mule, hopefully that answers your question. So, like another thing to consider, Mule, is it doesn't always have to be that volume is shifting from above price to below price. Sometimes it's even bearish if volume is still above, but it's shifting lower and lower, right? So let's say, for example, here on QQQ, right? At the time, 574 was the king node, and we had some strong volume. Let me delete these lines. We had some strong volume between 566 all the way to 570. So over this period of time, the fact that a lot of volume starts moving, some of it is moving down below spot price, but some of it is just moving over here to 566, 567, 568. So the fact that it's rolling lower is still actually pretty bearish, right? Because what they're saying there is our potential max ceiling of the day, which is before 574, and we had like a sort of like a gatekeeper here at these stack. We're now reinforcing that gatekeeper and it's flipping to become sort of like our new strongest ceiling, right? So even rolling levels, like rolling volume lower and lower, which is like rolling the ceiling down, or the inverse, which would be rolling the floors up, that's going to be something to watch out for because if they continue to do that all day, and I think later on midday, this is something else pretty obvious, um, that tells us, okay, our upside is now getting more and more restricted, so the risk reward is getting worse and worse, right? So always we need to look at how the volume is shifting. Um, but always the big lesson there is just don't chase any of these because otherwise the thesis you have could just disappear, right, in a matter of minutes based on how the nodes reshuffle. All right. So that was Mule. Let's see. OVZ. OVZ, I just actually just before starting this, I had recorded a session, not a session. I had recorded a recap of the double bottom in the morning, which I thought was like a very, very clear play. So I'm not gonna cover anything in the morning. Um, but I think there's a couple plays in the afternoon that I can maybe look at. So I believe, and I trade the afternoon a lot less. Like I'm usually just in meetings. So let me double check here. But no, so maybe it's this support resistance flip at 6370 that I'm looking for. Yeah, sorry, I don't. Yeah, so this one I don't. This is not an A setup, and I'm gonna explain why in a second. But definitely, like we got this pop back up around 135. Actually, I think that trade was pretty good. Give me a second here. Yeah. So we had price falling down towards 135, and we saw a couple things, right? Even, 15 minutes previous. We have SPY, obviously 6370 looks like it had flipped, right? So now we're holding that as a ceiling and flushing down. So at that point, we're looking at, okay, what floors exist, right? Obviously, 6330 looks like a pretty strong floor, 6320, and those are levels that we tapped much, much later in the day and reacted off of. But one important thing here is like we do have a bit of a gatekeeper here at 6350, right? Where this is a node where we have decent volume, and if you combine it with 6355, we do have around 5,000, which is somewhat significant, right? So it's minor compared to some of these other nodes, but it's still enough for me to say, okay, potentially combine this with the fact that 63 and 633 and 632 are huge nodes, right? Like these two nodes together are extremely strong. So as price was dipping into them, I'm saying, okay, SPY has a huge node that should prevent downside, right? Um, QQQ really didn't have a strong node to the downside. But then what you notice is as we came down, tapped into 633, that's exactly where we got this pop here, right? So I think that was one decent play there. Obviously, this play, you're guiding yourself mostly by the SPY map, right? If you look at this, on QQQ, we have this negative node stack, but it's usually a lot easier to play off these positive node stacks because since they're less volatile, we usually know that price will sort of breach into them and it'll bounce off the higher end. Whereas the negative nodes, it's a lot trickier due to the increase in volatility. We don't know, are we going to bounce at the top of the zone, at the bottom of the zone, at the midpoint? So usually these negative nodes are a little trickier to play. Um, but yeah, so the 63 was definitely a very strong level. And then this 560, 559, what you'll see is we actually bounced off the lower end, right? So it's a lot harder to pinpoint these in my experience. Whereas the positive node stacks are usually a little bit more to the point or to the dot. Okay, so yeah, there was one play for that pop there, and then as we popped though, like one big, like not a huge issue, but somewhat of an issue here with this trade was we didn't have too much upside, right? If we bounce here, we have about a dollar or two of room before we start hitting 562, before we start hitting like 635 as potential rug pull. And then even 6370, right? Once we start tapping into 6370, there's a chance this has now flipped to a ceiling and now we can reject down, right? So if you miss this pop, that would probably have been your next thinking, right? So even if you caught the pop, you need to still be tracking those same things because that's where you're going to trim your play, right? So you want to say, okay, as we get a $2, if it's a $2 full move, but you're bouncing from 560, even as we're approaching 562, right? You have to start being conservative or start trimming out, right? So even here, like we hit 561.2-ish. You're already wanting to trim out, especially as you see some of the volume that shifts around, right? And the 6370, right? Like we hit within $2 of that, I believe. So again, whether you're in a whether you're in a play for calls or you're looking for puts, you're still thinking in the same way. because if you're managing a position, that's where you want to trim out or sell completely out. And if you're looking for a position, that's you're looking for that thesis, right? Of where will this call bias end and when can we flip to puts, right? Yeah, so now if I start flicking through like minute by minute, what you'll see is this 560 node grew a ton, right, on QQQ. So we had a node here where, at the moment it was like 20,000. Then as we start getting this push up, right, you'll see this node just continuously is growing and growing in volume. So again, this is a case where as you see that volume stepping in really strong, you're now saying, okay, it seems like our upside is getting more limited, right? Because that the ceiling is getting lower and lower, right? And then say, SPX 6370 obviously was still there all day. I will say this rejection downwards, the reason I say it wasn't an ideal play is because of this SPY node, right? So this SPY node at 633 was showing a potential reverse rug pull, right? So if you didn't take this, I completely understand if you're scared off by the 633 node, right? And I wouldn't have taken this myself, I'll be honest. Like the first bounce was a little more clear. By the time we came down and got the second bounce, we did actually react a little bit, right? Like we bounced like $7, $8 on SPX. So like you could have scalped that certainly. But yeah, by this point, I mean, we had already sold off pretty hard, but by this point, we were saying, okay, like it's potential that this is going to be like a very strong sell-off, similar to Thursday or Friday, right? So again, yeah, this would have been another potential play. After this, right, like once we get this sell-off to start here, I wouldn't be interested because at this point, we really get no reversals, right? Like this is just a full push. So if you're not catching, this reversal is very tricky. Like honestly, unless you're playing like a very small starter entry, you would have been waiting for higher on this play. The only other chance I saw for downside was around here, around this 145. Um, yeah. Okay, and then the last one is the late day play. So obviously, this trade, what you'll see is as we start dropping off, right, you'll see SPX is gaining a ton of volume down here in these pockets at 6330 and even 6320 and 6335 as well. And then what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of these nodes on QQQ actually. So it's 556, 555, and even 553, those start picking up volume too, right? And same for the 630 on SPY. So so if you see here, right, in a 5 minute span, we see them flare up really strong, right? So what's happened here is they haven't actually grown too much, right? They've gone from 23 to 30,000, 18 to 23. So they have grown a bit, but also these upside nodes at 561, 562 that were previously colored in as heavy yellow, those have died off. And then so a lot of that has rolled to these volume down here. And same thing on SPX, right? The previous king node, which is 6370, a lot of that volume. We see 6330 growing, 6320 still growing, and even 6300 flares up a little bit, right? So we see overall all this volume is going down lower and lower and lower. And we still have ceilings, right? So SPY still has the 633 ceiling where if price tries to bounce, it's going to have a very hard time pushing much higher, right? So clues like that are always going to be like that consistent rolling of volume lower and lower is going to be a big clue of these like more trend days, right? So even if you don't catch the trend and it's not something that you can use to help hold the position, this is still valuable information because it prevents you from, opposing the trend and trying to catch calls, trying to catch the knife as frequently, right? Or even not at all, because if you don't see a very clear setup back upwards, in your mind, you'll be telling yourself like, okay, it's probably too risky to try to catch this knife for the moment, right? Yeah, so price eventually kept rolling down. So at this point, like the thesis around here probably would have been, okay, maybe 6335 or 63330 can bounce price. But again, as we push a little lower, what you'll notice is this 6335 lost a ton of volume. We push and it continues to lose that volume. We come and hit 63330. This node is basically lost not all of it, but a lot of its volume, right? At 6335. So if we open this up, which on the Discord bots, y'all are not going to be able to do, but you can still track like the actual values themselves. But here's what I'm saying, right? In a 15-minute span, this has lost 60% of its volume. So that floor we were going to try, like potentially an argument off the 6335 was there. It's just falling apart like right in front of our eyes, right? And all this volume is going to 6320, 6300, 6315. So at that point, you'd be looking at it and saying, okay, I think I'm going to allow it to drop even a bit more lower, right? And then at this point, now you're trying to see, okay, what lines up across the board, right? So you have your 6320, 6315. The 655 node, you have a strong support here on QQQ, stacked with 556. Um, and then you have the 630 reverse rug pull, right? So at that point, you start saying, okay, we are kind of getting an alignment here with 6320, 630, and this stack on QQQ. And that would have been this reversal down here, right? Where obviously we got this huge rip into end of day. So that probably would have been the like to me, this probably would have been like one of the more clear plays. But the afternoon was a bit tricky, right? Like I do think in strong sell-offs and like strong trends, it's a lot more difficult to trade reversals, obviously. So you have to be a little bit more picky about some of the setups, or a lot of times, like what I used to do is once I identified any kind of trend day, I would actually just stop trading, right? I would just come back the next day. So again, try to, if it's not something you're comfortable with or that you can't identify very quickly, then it is oftentimes better to be on the safe side and not trade or just be very picky about any setups you take. Okay, hopefully that helped OVZ with oh yeah, and then for the bounces in the morning, I can't upload it yet, but I'll just because I haven't posted it to YouTube, but once I do that, so after this meeting, I'll go ahead and do that. All right. Yeah, app. So app heat map. What is going on here? All right, so app, the heat map is usually pretty messy. So I don't usually trade it, but let's see. This level's been tested a couple times, but we do have this level down here at 360. But then if we go any higher, I'm not too interested in 360. Like we have really low volume on that. So let me see here. If we go daily. Yeah, I guess you have a bit of a level here. It's a rough level though. But yeah, you do have a bit of level here. Or actually maybe I'll just draw it as a rectangle. So you have this kind of level here, right? Where we've had some pretty heavy chops within it, but then we have held it a couple times for downside, upside, etc. So obviously this is a pretty wide range. So like I do recognize that. Um, so then a lot of times you'll probably have to use probably lower time frame structure, or honestly even like a fib here would. Yeah, I do wonder what the fib levels would be here. They probably align pretty well with this. Uh, Give me a second here. All right. Yeah, so the 0.707 is lining up really well with like where we already bounced. And then, if you're looking at this 0.786, that'd probably be on the low end of this range, right? So roughly like 320, maybe a little bit above. Wow. Yeah, so then if we go lower time frame, right? So the main node I see here is 330. 330 has decent volume, and then also 300, right? So there's a couple things I'll go over here. Um, so I know this is really zoomed out. Wait, hold up. Wait, let me zoom in further. I think y'all should be able to see now. Okay. So at least from what's visible, right, 330, we have a pretty strong floor there. I don't think any ceilings would come in just because of like general weakness of the market. But the other levels I'll point out here, which I'm quickly spotting. So 360, yes, the chart has it, but either to it, I don't know, possibly because it's already been tested a couple times, but we're not seeing too much exposure there to form a floor. But what we are seeing is there's two levels that are actually consistently defended, right? And what I mean by that is like there's nodes across several expirations. So, oh, wait. Okay, yeah, they show a bit better here. Sorry, I had my display a bit off. Um, so this 350 and this 300 level, right? When we start seeing volume across multiple different expirations, a lot of times this is a pretty good sign of that level will be pretty strongly defended, right? So for example, especially if you see that on the VEX, right? So GEX more short term, but if you go like as soon as I see these two bars on the GEX, I go check the VEX and I'll see here, right? Like the VEX at 300 is huge, right? So it makes sense just due to it being a psychological level. But we are seeing it that it's being defended pretty well, right, across several weeks. So I think I'd have to find what dates, but this was a setup that we saw on, I believe, Netflix and I believe IonQ actually, around 3, 4 weeks ago, and both of those levels did get defended pretty well, right? Maybe Lyft as well, I'll be honest. I'll try to find some of those and send them later for y'all. But the yeah, when we see these consistent levels, then a lot of times I'll mark it out and say, okay, I don't know if it's going to hit this week, next week, 2 weeks out, or at all. But if we do manage to go hit it, um, that's usually a pretty good pattern to look for. Um, but yeah, in terms of like actually playing downside, you'd probably have to wait for some kind of retest. So let me think here. Yeah, I don't really see any level I like on the chart, at least. I guess this 390 was decent, but we've already rejected off that. And we just don't have many strong ceilings, right? Like if you come look at these nodes, first of all, these nodes are pretty weak, right? So I don't know if app is not just not getting much volume lately or what it is. But we're not really seeing that strong of a node, right? If our king node is 164, the only node that has like substantial volume is up here at 415 and 115. And I would very much doubt that we're going to hit 415, right? Like I would expect as we've sold off, that 415 node has just shrank every day, right? So I'd be more curious on just if we come and tap this 300 level, and that's probably about all I would do on app. Yeah, so again, OVZ, like it's we're not assuming 300 will hit, right? But we're saying if it does go hit and we see still a similar thesis, then we can try to play a reverse off that, right? So always these levels is it's a like a if then statement, right? So sort of like when you're coding, as you go and hit that, um then we know that dealers are forced to react, and that's where we can go ahead and play that reversal, right? Okay, so hopefully that's clear. OBZ. Who else do we have in here? Or I'm trying to go in sequential order. Nick, it's good to wait 15 to 30 minutes. Yeah, Nick. So yeah, so actually I intentionally schedule meetings during the first 15 to 30 minutes. Because I mean maybe nowadays I would do better, but in the past those are some of like my worst times of the day. Was near open, just because that's when the nodes are shuffling around the most. Price action is also at its most hectic, right? Like if you're watching just the candles pop around, they're they're going everywhere, right? Like stuff is just flying around, and that's just due to just a huge injection of volume, right? That happens at the New York Open. So yeah, a lot of times I will wait, usually 15, 20 minutes, but usually 30 actually, until I start even looking at the charts, right? And that's just a personal thing. So again, it's with time and experience, you can trade that first period. Like I know John does it, Glitch does it, but it's something that if you're not as comfortable with the tool, you're not able to interpret the heat maps and adjust your bias as quickly, right? Just because you haven't, you kind of have to build that skill just through repetition. So if you start trading in the early days, like in the early period of the day, you're just putting yourself in an unfavorable position, right? It's much better for you to trade, let's say from 10 to 11:30 when there's still a lot of good movement, right? Like you're still New York AM, so that's what usually the majority of the range is created. But you're also in a period of the day where the heat maps are not fluctuating super insane, right? So it's something that you can still, um, take spend some more time interpreting what you're looking for, building your thesis, and then having it still be there, right? Once price goes and hits your levels. So I would recommend if it's something you're new to, just wait those 30 minutes. It's going to be worth it. And then long term, you can consider if you start trading earlier and earlier. But yeah, just treat first 30 minutes and also like last 10 to 15 minutes, right? Obviously, when you're looking at MOC, as pretty sketchy periods, right? Just because of the rapidness of how it's reshuffling and the erratic price movement or price action that happens at those times. And then another thing, another, I guess, last thing, right? It's like always know the context of when you're trading, right? So equally, there's periods outside of these that can be terrible for different reasons, right? So like lunchtime, obviously, is a lot of chop usually. Always track if Trump or Powell or somebody speaking. Usually that'll lead to pretty erratic price movement and a lot of like reshuffling, rapid reshuffling. So, most times you want to avoid those kind of things going on, right? and just protect yourself, shield yourself from those a little bit. Okay, uh, Kenna, um, can you tell how to manage a 1K account? Oh, yeah. So I mean, that's always difficult, right? Is the smaller accounts. So there's a couple things. Um, One is like absolutely you want to swap over to SPY QQQ, right? This will allow you to actually hold multiple contracts, right? If you're playing SPX, you're buying 200, $300 contract, and it's pretty far the money, right? SPY, QQQ, you can grab something that's 60 to 70 bucks, right? You know, you could even buy two of them, still keep within 100, 150 bucks total, right? Like, because you never want to be in a position where you're over risking relative to the portfolio. This is assuming this is like the only port you have, right? If this is a challenge account, I'll cover that after. But assuming it's like this is all you got, you probably don't want to be risking over 5 to 10%, right? So you're looking for very small plays, and yeah, like for now, it is you are just going to stack a lot of base hits, right? It's going to be okay. Like I'm taking calls puts here for 50%, and you're slowly stacking it, but as you start to compound a little bit, right? Um, what you'll be able to do is like, even 50% or 100 bucks, you're getting 50 a day, right? So at one point, you'll be able to say, okay, now instead of my single contract, I'll be able to grab two or even three, right? And you're still grabbing like pretty cheap contracts, but SPY QQQ, where you're still having a healthy delta, right? Where you're not going to get screwed over because of theta decay, right? So that's the approach I'll take. And like the key thing is just remaining disciplined, right? And then making sure you don't jump to SPX too soon, right? Because you shouldn't be swapping to SPX as soon as you can afford a contract healthily, right? You should be swapping once you can afford multiple, right? Because the one of the biggest things that will help you when you're trading small accounts is the ability to scale, like trim and then leave runners, right? Because if you can't leave runners, you close a trade at 30, 40%, it's hard to capitalize if the move was a full trend, right? Whereas, even if you sell one at 30, 40%, if you have another runner going 150, 200%, or even 100%, right? Your average win percent, like your average gain per trade and your average loss per trade, it's skewing a little bit towards the winning side, right? So that's how I would treat that. I mean, it's always going to be difficult, right? Like you have to be incredibly disciplined, but people who are able to manage very small accounts and do well often do very, very good because it instills a lot of good habits in you, right? So, yeah, I would say, whether it's your own thesis, whether you're taking alerts, from owls, obviously, make sure you're only taking alerts that are within your risk, like your risk profile, right? Like don't start grabbing contracts that are 30 to 50% of the whole port, right? Because I know obviously some people trade larger portfolios here and they're probably alerting stuff that contracts that do cost like 400 bucks, right? So you also want to make sure you're avoiding anything that's going to put you over like your defined risk, right? All right, hopefully that sounds good. Kino. Mm. All right, Abdul. When you're looking at Mu, how would you trade? Yeah, let's take a look. Yeah, so and this is something that's going to happen a lot whenever we're selling off pretty strong, not just on individual tickers, but also on indexes. But what'll happen is a lot of these leftover upside nodes. So first of all, especially this 417 column, that's OPEX, right? So a lot of times OPEX positions are taken a lot very, very well in advance, right? Months, etc. So what's happening is like you're having this volume step in on 417 for the 417 strike, or sorry, expiration. But that position is probably being taken at least a month in advance, right? So if we look at MU a month before April 17th, we're looking at MU that's trading around 440, right? 420, 440, 450 even. So a strike that high up actually makes a lot of sense, right? At that point, you're saying, okay, that's, it's a bit of a drop off, or if it was taken even earlier, that's actually a rise upwards, right? But what we need to recognize is like by now, the fact that we sold off so strong in the general market and MU as well, that's almost, it'd be pretty high certainty, right? These nodes are not going to hit, right? Like that we're not just going to full reverse this move. I guess assuming that the war doesn't just like end, right? And there's not some like huge news like that. Um, So then what I'm looking at here is I'd actually be expecting a lot of this volume to roll lower as we approach the date, right? Or a lot of this volume to just fade. So one trick you can use, it's a little harder with the Discord bot, but one trick you can use is if you come in here, right, and like, yeah, let's just check, 2 Thursdays ago, right? And you just go check what that node is at. A lot of times checking how these nodes have developed will help give you a few clues, right? So actually, I don't know if this is the case with this one, right? But all right, so this 500 node looks like we're at like 90,000. So then a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just sort of like start flicking through days. That makes sense. And then just start seeing, okay, how is that node progressing or not, right? So is it shrinking off? Is it maintaining that volume? It's still roughly 90 actually, so it's kept it pretty strong. And then I'll just flick through, right? I'll just go look through the days, and then see is it holding it right as it sells off or not, right? So actually, this node is holding a lot of that volume, which I find is pretty curious. 500. Oh no, no, sorry, that was a 500 node, right? Give me a second here, y'all. Sorry about that. So if we go back here, if we go look at all the strikes. Yeah, that was previously as 500. So then as price was dropping last week, that volume's rolled to a lower node, is what it looks like. Yeah, because eventually 500 was just completely off the map, actually, due to some of the sell-offs we've had. And then, yeah, when did 500 actually just pop off the map? Was it here in the morning? Oh, previous day. Okay, so it was on the 24th. All right, yeah, so it's 500, but then yeah, what you'll see is a lot of that volume started shifting lower, right, to 480. So then if you're looking at this 2 days later, right, you're seeing nodes of equivalent value, but instead of a 500, it's now 415, right? So this is same as what I was talking about on the indexes of like volume rolling lower and your ceiling getting lower and lower and lower. So yeah, if you look at a snapshot of this, it looks bullish because you're seeing a huge node upside. But if you look at it, how it's progressed over a few days or a few weeks, you're now seeing that, okay, that volume has shifted from a much higher node and it's just rolled lower and lower, right? So overall, to me, that's it's more of a bearish indication, right, than bullish. Even though it does, like you can look at this in the moment, this looks like okay, like we have a huge node upside, like that's interesting, right? And then the other thing is like even if that node did remain consistent, you're looking at it, you are looking for a play in that direction. You still need to come and check. Okay, what'll happen there is like the VEX will give you your good, let's say long time frame bias or bias over the next couple of weeks. But you're still looking at the GEX constantly to establish, okay, if I want an upside play, I need to find a floor that price will tap into, and then we can bounce upwards off of it, right? So for example, in this one, if we're not currently at any strong floor, so you'd probably be looking and saying, okay, I wonder if maybe 300 will hit it. We can get a bounce off 300, right? Or something like that to that effect. And then, of course, like, you're cross comparing over and saying, do we even have a strong level at 300? So 300, we kind of have this level here, right? Where we had this previous high. So you say, okay, maybe it's this previous all-time high that's going to bounce us up, right? With the kind of run that MU had, you're gonna have like a million previous high levels. So honestly, it's gonna be pretty tricky to trade. This 260 level is actually pretty strong, but I don't know if we're actually gonna dip that far. Or you can start putting in, I don't know, maybe like a fib or standard deviation or some other strategy like that. But yeah, so a lot of times you'll get the split bias, right? Because the way I think of it as well is like the GEX as price drops, right? The GEX is much quicker to adapt, or not adapt, but like to catch up to price, if that makes sense, to reshuffle and move those nodes lower, whereas the VEX takes a little longer to get those nodes rolling lower. So then a lot of times on very sharp sell-offs, you get this situation where the GEX has nodes very close to price or even below price, but VEX still has a bunch of nodes that are sort of lagging on the upside, right? And they still haven't made their way down. So just be careful, especially with these sharp sell-offs, of targeting huge upside because sometimes those are kind of like leftover nodes. All right, hopefully that helps. Pika and Barney. Yeah, so Pika is just positive. Like Pika being Pikachu from like the Pokemon cartoons. And then Barney is like from just another TV show. Not a cartoon, it's just like a kid's show. So like Barney was purple dinosaur, so that was for negative nodes, and then Pico was just yellow. So the one thing I'll say is don't view Pika and Barney just in terms of color. It is a sign-based thing, right? So strong positive nodes are always going to be the like good yellow, are almost always, and then strong negative nodes are almost always going to be purple, right? But there are going to be cases where you're seeing yellow and purple that are actually not. And I'll try to find an example after this, but yeah, the warning I'll give there is like that's just how this is coded, right? It's not that it's showing wrong or not on some of the examples I'm about to give. It's just based on what is your strongest positive, strong, and negative. But you get really weird. You sometimes get these weird situations where if you don't have like if you have your strong positive node way, way strong, like way, way higher than a negative node, you get these weirdly skewed maps. And I'll try to find a few examples to show y'all in a second. Um, but yeah, and then the other thing I'll caution there is like because for example on the rug pull, right? Most people define the rug pull as it must be a yellow over a purple node. It actually doesn't have to be. A lot of times it can be it just has to be a positive over a negative node. Now they have to be strong positive and negative nodes, right? Like you can't just so for example on SPX, right? Like we're not going to call these two nodes up here a rug pull 6400 6395 because this is very negligible volume, right? Compared to where what our king node is. Um, but then something like, I don't know, let's say this spy node, this would be a reverse rug pull, right? Because those are nodes that are more significant. But what's going to happen is sometimes you're going to have significant positive nodes that are not actually yellow. They'll show more as like green. So for example, 640 on spy here, 624 on spy here. And sometimes you're going to have, oh, there's not one right now, but sometimes you'll have negative nodes that show like bluish, right? For example, 618 is kind of like light purple. So don't always view it just in terms of color because sometimes the colors can mislead you. I would always recommend that just look at it as what the value of the number actually is. And let me see if I can find. Yeah, so MSTR is a good example, right? Like you'll see almost everything here is yellow green, right? The reason that's the case is because the strongest negative node is 5.6 million, and then the strongest positive node is only 800, right? 800,000. So when you're skewed very strongly towards one or the other, the background color will turn almost all the opposite, right? So a very strong negative node will make the whole background turn yellow, yellowish, greenish, whereas a very strong positive node will turn the whole background purplish, like we see here on MVST, right? So that's why I always say like it's always just double check what are the actual numbers you're looking at. Um, and then yeah, don't always get caught up on like what is the actual color, right? Because sometimes the colors can mislead at times. But yeah, you're like most of your neutral maps are gonna have like a bluish background, right? So you'll see on this background, the positive and the peak positive and peak negative nodes are very close in volume, right? 65 versus 62,000. So then you get this more normal aquamarine bluish kind of background, right? Hopefully that helps. Who asked this? DG. Right, let me see. All right. Anything else? What yeah, I guess we're close to an hour, but yeah, I can stay on. I can stick around a little longer if anyone needs. Otherwise, can also cut it early. It's up to y'all. And then actually, the last thing I'll ask, like, are y'all well aware of the resources that exist around the tool and like where to find some of them? I think maybe that's also something I can go over. Can I real quick explain reverse rug pull? Yeah, so a rug pull is just positive over negative. So yeah, I'm gonna explain what it is. I'm not gonna explain why it works because I have a video. Let me, yeah, as I go through the resources, I'll just show you where that video is. But at its core, rug pulls are just positive over negative, significant positive over significant negative node. And what we're looking for is for price to approach from the negative node side, tap into it, overshoot a little bit, hit the positive, and then get that rejection down. The reverse rug pull is everything I just said mirrored over the x-axis, right? So flipped vertically. Um, and what you're looking for there is you want to see a negative node above a positive node and price to drop in from above, right? And tap into that negative node, undershoot it, and then tap that positive node and shoot upwards, right? So again, yeah, actually, I'll just let me bring up this other window and I'll go over like where all the resources are, and then I'll show you the video that I'd recommend you watch if you want like the full, like I just recorded over the weekend, about the rug pull side. Yeah. I'm gonna go over where you can find some of that. So a lot of the resources, so the best resource is always going to be Glitch's YouTube. He has a little less time than John and I to create like specific content, but when Glitch hops on a live, whenever he does any of his sessions, that's always going to be the top thing, right? So I always recommend to people to go to his YouTube first, right? Just because, he's traded with this tool longer than anybody. He developed the tool. He has like a very good understanding of the market mechanics of why this tool works. But he's also able to simplify a lot of those concepts, right? And explain them well for those of us that, even myself, right? Like I don't know every full market mechanic, right? Of like what is positive gamma, negative gamma, like what it all means on the dealer side, right? Like a lot of that stuff, still stuff that I read up on pretty frequently to sort of refresh myself. But this is all stuff that Glitch knows like 100%, but he's also able to simplify it enough and explain it well to, to those of us that are newer to trading, right? So I always find like his way of explaining is like very easy to follow. So always his channels is going to be like my advice for everyone of where to get started. So he did actually do a few onboardings. Oh, give me a second. Why is my mouse moving so slow? Give me a second. I think I messed up the DPI or something. Okay, there we go. So yeah, what I'm always gonna recommend is his page. I would start with this Heatseeker 101, but actually the collaboration he did with the bakery. The reason is when he did the intro sessions for OWLS, this was an older iteration of the tool, and a lot of these were based on Discord maps, etc. So I would still look through a few of these actually, the 101, 102, 103, especially 103 if you're interested in swing trading like individuals. The 103 session is very relevant for that. Um, but for any of you that are newer, well, I just looked through the 101 because the more recent 101, just because the tools changed a bit, so then this one just accounts for a couple of those changes. After that, so this is more just of how Heatseeker works, how he uses it, etc. I would watch this SPX 0DTE. So any of you interested in indexes, this is telling you essentially his style of trading, SPX, what he like, what he looks for, like what his logic is, not just in like the place he takes, but just his whole framework for the system. So I think these two videos are pretty necessary. So then as you go watch any of these case studies, so any of these other 5 videos, not the recent one, but these other ones about identifying market regime and about some of these like SPX plays that he caught, you'll be able to understand these a lot better if you understand how he trades, like his style of trading and what he's trading with, right? So the tool itself. So these 5 videos are going to make a lot more sense if you watch these two first. And yeah, I would go through these. He's basically just doing a replay of some of the trades he took throughout the day and then taking a few questions from like people who were watching. So, yeah, so like these like recent 8 videos are huge. Well, actually, this Q&A, I'd have to think about it. I don't remember what most of the questions were about. I think yeah, this Q&A is also useful. But it's more just like random questions popping in and not like a specific topic. All right. And then the other ones I'll recommend. So John has uh oh, I didn't mean to open this. He has this futures clinic where right now it's like 6 videos, but I think he's gonna add to it every week. But it's basically him going through how he trades futures, a lot of the tips he's give people for beginners. So obviously if you don't do futures, some of this is not gonna be relevant in terms of like what is a prop firm, how do you get set up on a prop firm? That's not gonna matter. But a lot of the charting stuff, so I think that would be the session 2 and maybe 3 is going to be very relevant, right? And I think session 6, the one he did last Sunday, is also going to be very useful because then he's talking about how does he decide his thesis, right? And a thesis for ES and SPY is the same, right? You're looking at the same chart. Well, obviously, like the numbers are different, but it's the movement is basically identical. Same thing with NQ and QQQ, right? So for any of you interested in indexes, I would go watch through that futures Clinic. I think he has a couple trade recaps, but not too many. It's been a while since he posted some of those. And then over on my page, so I have a few more playlists. I have trade recaps as well. I'll post the one from today for I don't remember who was asking about that one. And then I also have this Heatseeker fundamentals, right? So this one, I'm trying to add more and more to it. So actually, I guess I have two playlists that are going to be most useful for any of y'all. So one, oh, I don't know what just happened there. So one is going to be this navigation. So if any of you are like really, really new to the tool and just don't know how to use the Discord bots, or even the website if you buy access, this navigation is just me going, it's a few videos of like how do you use the Discord one, how do you use the website, and I'm gonna add a few things on like how do you use velocity and a few other things that I'm gonna mention there. And then this fundamentals playlist is probably gonna be also very useful. So for who's asking about the rug pull? Yeah, Nick, you were asking about the rug pull. Like I have a video here, it's 10 minutes. Like just feel free to just go in, watch it. And basically, I'm trying to make small, like max 15, 20-minute videos. But even probably I should target towards 10, where instead of having to go watch Glitch's hour and 20-minute long video and trying to figure out like at what point he covers a certain topic, if you have a question about a specific thing, you can just come in here, find it, and then just watch 5, 10 minutes, right? So it's supposed to be more digestible chunks of info of stuff that's covered elsewhere, but this sort of helps you get through it a little quicker, right? So yeah, across the three YouTubes of the three of us, there should be enough, it's more than enough to look through for now. But if you ever run out of any videos, if you ever see any topics that are not covered well, let me know, and that's something I'll add to one of my playlists. Like I'll go record a video about it. Um, and then there are a few written docs, which I think if you go to what was it? So if you go to heat seeker analysis within OWLS and you click on the pinned posts, the most recent one is going to be a post by me about the resources, right? So a lot of the stuff actually is going to be what I just went over. So I mentioned John's features clinic, my page, glitches page. But there's also the first two links are going to be pretty useful, which is going to be this docs, Skylit docs, which is sort of going through what is a tool, how do you best use it, what are some limitations. So I would definitely read through this as well. But then also this patternpedia is going to be very useful because this is going to go over, like this one has the rug pull explained just more through writing, right? But this is something we're trying to update this because right now it's just very light on examples, right? Like we explain what it is in theory, but there's not many examples to go off of. But yeah, this patternpedia and this Skylit Docs is also going to be another couple resources you can use. And then finally, like the the myself, Jewel, John, and even Glitch, right? Anytime you guys message in like the Heatseeker support channel, like we do our best to get to it as quick as we can. So any questions you may have, just ping one of us, like just tag me and I'll get my eyes on it at some point throughout the day. Or DM me, right? Also feel free to DM me and just ask me any questions there. Or you can save any of these questions for these Monday sessions, right? So feel free, you see something on, I don't know, Friday while you're trading the indexes, doesn't make any sense. Just go ahead, bookmark it, what time it happened, and all of that. And then just bring it to the session Monday, right? If you prefer to explain, if you prefer to get like a live explanation. All right, so that was Nick. iPhone. Oh yeah, iPhone, no problem. Uh, Joe. Oh, you booked a one-on-one with me at 11 p.m. If I'm available, we can start earlier. Yeah, Joe. I'll DM you. It depends I don't know how long this is gonna keep going for. Am I able to show how Glitch called the roll down? Like, what time did the roll down happen? Was it 574? Cash. Yeah. Let me delete this window. So I think I already discussed this a little bit, but yeah, I mean, I can do it again. So yeah, I think well, I mean, the sell-off, I guess I haven't, right? So like the sell-off started a lot earlier. So it started like at 11:45, right? And if we just start going like, I don't want to go minute by minute because it'll take forever, but what you'll see here is like a lot of volume just started shifting lower and lower and lower, right? So what you'll see is, for example, on QQQ, right? We're getting some of this volume shifting towards 566 and then lower. And then also SPX, what you notice is a lot of this volume is just going to start tailing off these higher nodes. Um, so actually like this big flip point around 12, right? Or 12 to 1205, we got this 6445 to tail off pretty strong. And we got a lot of volume distributed around these three nodes, these three clumps of nodes on the downside. 6370 also picked up a lot. Cynthia QQQ, right? These nodes just continue to strengthen, and then we're getting a weakening up here. And then what we're seeing also is that SPY, a lot of the volume is rolling a bit lower, right? So shifting from 640, 639 down to 635, 636, and even 633, 632. So if we come click on these nodes, what you'll see is that these have grown by almost 50%, right, in a 10 to 15 minute span. So that's a pretty significant change in volume, right? Like I always tell people it's not always just that it's growing or not, it's that it's growing significantly, right? So for me, if I'm seeing stuff over a 10 to 15-minute period grow by 30, 40, 50%, that's a big change, right? Especially because these are significant nodes, right? Like, if I'm seeing a node down here, if I'm seeing this node grow, I don't really care because it's very small. But if I'm seeing, this clump of nodes at 630, 633 and 632 grow that significantly, then it's a big clue of like, okay, definitely they're picking up some traction, right? So that's the whole principle he's saying, Cash, is like he's just seeing a lot of this volume roll lower and lower, right? And then as he's seeing that, basically what's happening the whole time is like they're extending our downside, right? Because a lot of volume is rolling, shifting lower, but they're also capping our upside because as the volume rolls lower, right? So for example, here on QQQ, right, where we had 566, 567, and then this clump of nodes as a bit of a ceiling or a floor at the time. Once we drop under, though, we'll notice like these nodes above are almost gone, and we're getting a lot of some pickup on nodes lower, right? Well, maybe not that node, but I guess these two nodes here, 560, 561. And then SPY is having volume shift from 640 and roll towards 636, 633, right? So that's the whole principle he's talking about. Is like we're just consistently pushing volume lower and lower, right? So this is a pretty good time lapse here. So 12:55, we flick 5 minutes, 10 minutes, then you see 633 pop up. You go a little further, and now you see another big push to 633. But you can go further. Now you see 632 and 630 pop up, right? So it's that kind of downwards uh, shifting of volume that he's talking about. So it's not always a like specific node, right? It's not always just like, oh, QQQ one node shifted lower, but the fact we're seeing this across the board was a really big clue. But 574 to 563. Oh, you might have been talking about like really early morning. Uh, yeah, so yeah, definitely. Like even early morning, right? Like 574 had volume, but you'll see 570 grew a ton, right? So then even some volume, like some shifts like that, right, where 574 is tailing off, 562 is growing. So yeah, the ones that you mentioned also have completely. I see your point there. All right. Yeah. Anything else, anyone? Yeah. Otherwise, I guess yeah, we can just cut this early. There's no other questions coming in. All right. Yeah, I'll give it a couple more minutes, but if not, yeah, thanks everyone who joined. And then again, this is recorded. I'll post it. I guess I'll make a new playlist of just like office hours that I do for. What I'm gonna start doing is doing these all on Zoom. So I'm actually gonna post office hours that I do in here for Asgard, some live trading stuff. And I'll just start posting everything. Every session I do, I'll post it in there. So, all right. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate y'all and all the questions. Hopefully it was of use. And again, I know tomorrow you guys have you guys have access to the free bots, so feel free to DM me. Feel free to message in the Heat Seeker support channel. I'll try to have good eyes on it Especially in the afternoon. In the morning, I'll be live streaming at one point, but starting lunchtime, I'll get good eyes on that channel for y'all. So y'all are not just stranded. Uh, oh, yeah, Nick, I would appreciate that. Yeah, there's no obligation, but I would appreciate it. Just feel free, DM me, and I can help give y'all. I think with the new tiers, there's also a new set of discount codes. So yeah, any of y'all interested, make sure you either DM me or message in the channel, and I'll make sure that you guys are getting in for because I know they're cheaper tiers, but it's not dirt cheap. Like I know there's still a cost factor. So anything I can do to help y'all just get cheaper access, I'm happy to do it, right? All right, everyone. Hope y'all have a good Monday night and good luck for the rest of the week as well. All right, see y'all.